Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing the 2015 Pixar movie, Inside Out, directed by Pete Docter. And this to me is one of the best Pixar movies, and to be fair, I think most people would agree with that, because this movie captures so well what Pixar is so brilliant at doing, which is taking these universal truths and making it feel so personal to their audience. And that's why they're able to reach this vast, wide audience around the entire world of people of all ages, even though, of course, the main demographic is children, but it affects each and every one of us, that it's really for everyone, all these movies, young, old, it doesn't matter. And that's just what's so incredible about it. That despite, of course, what the best Pixar movies do, despite having fun, lovable characters and beautiful animation and moving, lovely music and incredible voice acting, and I could go on and on, emotional storytelling, of course, in addition to all of that, taking all of these things that we all go through and making it feel so personal that it just touches each and every one of us in a deep and profound way. And of course, with this movie, we all have emotions. We all experience emotions every single day. So it's just a truly beautiful thing. And when I first heard about this movie, my thought was, what an amazing, incredible idea of personifying emotions. The emotions in our head. It's just so brilliant. And evidently, Pete Docter got the idea for this particular movie when his own daughter, who was 11 at the time, kind of just like was sarcastic to him or rolled her eyes at him, just gave him attitude, whatever. Because, around that age, you start going through puberty, so it's hormones, what are you gonna do? So then he thought to himself, what is going on in her head? So, that's what's just so, again, so brilliant about Pixar. That personal experience, he created this beautiful movie that each of us can take something away from it that we've all experienced. So it's just absolutely brilliant to me. And Pete Docter has worked on many Pixar movies, but in particular, he also directed Monsters, Inc., Up, and the upcoming movie Soul, which looks really good too. And I haven't seen every Pixar movie yet, but I've seen the majority of them. And this one, again, it's just, to me, it's like top 5. It's absolutely brilliant and such a fun, creative idea. And I had heard also there was something called Herman's Head that was similar to this with like emotions, I guess, in your head. I'm not too familiar, but I remember reading about that back when this was coming out. And I did see this movie in theaters, and I will say this is a rare movie. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but this movie is actually a film, I would say, that I wish I could have seen first when I was younger and then rewatched it again years later, being older. But what's cool, too, is that we have the 5 emotions, and I had read, too, that there were other ideas, like they went through so many other emotions before they narrowed it down to these 5, which, of course, are joy, sadness, fear, disgust, and anger. And we have joy, voiced by Amy Poehler, and Amy Poehler is she's fantastic as Joy. And I vaguely remember, like, in an interview, her saying, like, oh, I asked advice of Tom Hanks, of course, Tom Hanks, who voices Woody, for how to always kind of maintain this upbeat energy, especially for Joy, since you're personifying joy. So she had to always, like, I remember her saying that, like, in an interview, like, oh, I just had to, like, always have this upbeat attitude. And then, of course, we have sadness, played by Phyllis Smith, aka Phyllis Lapman Vance from The Office, which, quick fun fact about that, Phyllis wasn't an actress. She actually became an actress because reading the lines with the auditions for The Office, then she became an actress with that show. Then we also have Mindy Kaling, who was also on The Office, who voices Disgust. And I'm a big fan of Mindy Kaling as well. She's a fantastic writer. She wrote for The Office. Then she created her own show, The Mindy Project, which is really great. I haven't seen every episode, but at some point I want to watch all of it. And then right now she also, she's worked on many other movies, shows she's written, and she currently has a show for Netflix, Never Have I Ever. Then Bill Hader voices Fear. I've mentioned Bill Hader already because I talked about him last week when I talked about Superbad, but I'm a big fan of Bill Hader's work. He's a great writer too. He actually was a writer for a little bit on one of my all-time favorite shows, South Park. I also mentioned he has his own show, Barry, and then he worked a little bit as a consultant on this movie too, as a writer here and there, and then Lewis Black as Anger. So the reason I wish I was younger having first seen this movie, because I feel I wonder what my kid logic would have been seeing it as a kid versus then watching it as an adult, because I just feel this would have been a fun movie to see as a kid too. But, it hit me in the feels. It's just so cleverly executed. And what a really cool idea with them in headquarters. And it's clever, too, how, they just, as if they are Riley. It's mom and dad, stuff like that, that they are part of Riley. And Riley herself is based on Pete Docter's daughter. And I will say, though, I can't relate to the actual plot of them moving, because I had never moved, when I was younger or anything. I always had been in the same place, growing up. So I imagine how difficult that can be, starting over, having to make new friends when you're so, you miss your home and all of that. So that's really what Riley is struggling with, obviously, that everything is new to her and that she misses her best friend back home in Minnesota. She misses her hockey team. The one tiny criticism if I have to have a criticism, because not everything's perfect, but whatever. The one criticism I will say is that when I first watched this anyway, I don't really feel this way now, but the parents felt kind of generic to me a little bit. We don't even know their names. It's just mom and dad, but that's okay. Watching it now, though, I just love how they're such a loving, sweet family, and it's just really adorable. And again, all of the little things that just feel so warm and fuzzy about this movie. There's a moment when they're first in the new place, and then everything's a mess, and Riley doesn't like the new house, but then she goes to sleep, and then Joy says, "Don't worry, tomorrow I'm gonna make sure tomorrow is amazing and you'll be happy." And then she's I know I'm not supposed to do this, when she unplugs the machine and puts on the memory of her ice skating. And there's that beautiful, soft piano music, and then we see, in the memory, Riley ice skating, and then we see Joy ice skating, as if she's, guiding her and, ice skating with her. And it's just a serene, tranquil moment. And I remember watching it that first time in theaters and being this is Pixar. This is that warm, fuzzy, calm, sweet, heartwarming feeling. Just a nice, simple, beautiful scene. I just loved that. It's just really, really sweet. And a quick thing about each of the emotions and their designs that reminds me that I read this in interviews too with Pete Docter. He said that each of them obviously being super, they went through so many different revisions, obviously, in designs for each of the characters before they landed on the final designs. But how each of them represents a certain shape and everything, how Joy is a star and she glows more compared to the other emotions. And also the reason her hair is blue is actually because I didn't know this actually, but because they didn't want her to look too similar to Tinkerbell. So I'm assuming originally she had blonde hair, because then Tinkerbell also has the green dress. So there's a little fun fact for you. And then we have, so she's a star, and then Disgust is a piece of broccoli. And it's funny how Disgust, it's she has the sarcasm, and she's the whole thing with Joy is that she understands each of the emotions except for sadness. So she understands Disgust in particular protects Riley from being poisoned, socially and literally. It's oh no, broccoli. So she looks like a piece of broccoli or spinach or anything that kids don't like to eat. And then Fear is a nerve ending or something, and Fear, of course, protects Riley too. And then Anger too is she says how anger is the one that makes sure everything is fair, and anger is meant to be a red brick. And then, of course, when he bursts into flames. And then sadness is a teardrop. A couple years ago, I remember one of my coworkers, she had just dyed her hair blue, unrelated to this, though. But then she's well, since my hair is blue, I'm going to dress up as Sadness for Halloween. So it was just, really cool. She had the blue hair, and then she had, the sweater, and she had borrowed something to be, the orb, the memory orb. So, like, other emotions that were considered, I know that he said surprise was one of them, and then, like, other ones that were, like, similar to these emotions, and they kind of just, like, simplified it to, it's like, well, this one's similar, so then, like, let's just have one that represents kind of other emotions as well. But what's interesting is that evidently early on in developing the script, originally it was going to be sadness and fear, like, getting lost and, like, out of headquarters and that whole, like, journey, which would have been interesting, but not exactly, because really, joy, the opposite is sadness, so that makes much more sense to having those opposites. And also it makes more sense because Joy's arc in this movie is to understand the purpose of sadness, since joy is Riley's main emotion. And of course, like, I love that cute thing at the beginning, oh, you're a little bundle of joy, it's so cute. And then sadness comes along, and she's like, well, I'm not really sure why sadness is here. So the whole thing with joy is her coming to understand what's the point of sadness. And obviously she learns that through this journey in this movie. And what's also great about this movie that stuck out to me is that it has no villain, and I found that really brilliant. And at first, when I first saw this movie, though, I thought to myself, because you know what Pixar loves to do, those classic, villain reveals where one character seems all great, and then turns out they're the villain. So I was worrying, first time seeing this movie, I had thought the surprise villain was going to be Riley's imaginary friend Bing Bong, voiced by Richard Kind. I'm so glad that wasn't the case, but that's what I had thought at first. I was like, I hope he's not going to be the surprise villain. And since I mentioned him, let me just talk about his arc for a moment. First off, his design is really clever and creative and fun, with his elephant trunk and how he's part dolphin, and he's got the cat tail, and he cries candy, so cute. He would definitely fit in, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Remember that show? Anyway, that's for another time. But it's just so sweet yet devastating how he sacrifices himself to save Joy. It's just so devastating, though, but it's like a beautiful thing that he does, sacrificing himself to get Joy out of the memory dump with the wagon and, like, them singing. And then when he's just about to disappear and he just says, take her to the moon for me. And then when he just fades away. And it's a real moment of growth when Joy says, I'll try, I promise. Instead of her saying, like, I will. That at that point that's when she understands the point of sadness, when she sees that memory in the pile. So I just like that basically Bing Bong had served his purpose, that when Riley was young she had a best imaginary friend, but then as she got older he was fading, didn't really remember him anymore. And so it's just one of those sad things, though, but that just shows his true love for Riley. So it's just really sweet, but yet devastating, of course, made me cry. But I'm glad that that was his purpose in the movie, and not to, like, be some hidden surprise villain. And there's a lot of great fun stuff in this movie, too. I like how then we see the mom's emotions and dad's emotions, and how with mom, her main emotion is sadness, which is interesting. And in another, like, interview article I read, Pete Docter said that based on his own mother, that, like, his mother always, like, never wanted anyone to be sad, so she was taking on the sadness. That was an interesting thing to me. And with dad, his main emotion is anger. I love that whole scene that's like putting the foot down, the foot is down, with dad's fear, his fear, like the old mustaches, like dad. And fear, like his fear is voiced by Color-Says Rocky, who does so many voices, but one of my favorites is he's Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life. And I also just love, like, the whole thing, like, the train of thought, that's so clever, like a literal train of thought, and, like, the core memories, of course, like, and, like, all the different memory orbs, the catalogs of long-term memories, and all, like, that stuff, the abstract thoughts and imagination land. It's really, like, what a cool world that they invented, all inside our heads. Just so amazing. I just love, like, the bits of humor, like when they're on the train and then Joy spills the box and she's like, oh no, these facts and opinions, I mixed them up, it's so hard to tell which is which. Like, don't worry about it, happens all the time, like mixing up facts and opinions, that's great. And then when they're in imagination land and when like they get, it's like, oh, first prize, and then sadness participation award. I remember I got such a big laugh in the theater. Like, I remember that when we first saw this in theaters. Oh my god, 'cause that's just like, everyone gets a participation award. That's great. I also loved the joke with then like those cleaner people. It's like, oh, I'll get rid of the president's names or whatever, and it's like, oh, I'll get rid of it's like, oh, piano lessons. Oh, this is almost all fit. It's like, just keep chopsticks and heart and soul. That just was like, oh my god, it just felt so real too. So hilarious. Oh my goodness. Like one of the very few piano songs that most people can play. Like, it's just great. I don't know. I loved that too. And also, of course, the whole thing with the jingle that keeps, like, oh, we'll never forget this one. It's like, oh, what the heck? And then, like, it comes back multiple, like, 3 different times. Triple dent, gum will make you smile. And then anger, this again. I also love, too, like, a random thing when Riley's at school. Poor Riley when she starts to cry, though. But when the teacher's like, I'm sure you get much more snow than we do. And then Joy's, like, laughing hysterically. She's like, she's hilarious. Like, genuinely laughing. It's just so funny. So the whole point, like, the whole progression and the whole journey for Joy in the movie is that she has to get back to headquarters, her in sadness, and then they're just left to their own devices, fear, disgust, and anger. And then when they get the idea, well, like, anger first gets the idea, it's like, let's go back to Minnesota, get new core memories, so then we can be happy again. And I also love the part when, like, earlier in the movie with Bing Bong, when they get rid of that wagon thing, and then he's upset, and then Sadness is just, like, consoling him, saying, oh, that's really sad, and you and Riley must have had such great times together. And then Joy has a moment of, wow, how'd you do that? And Sadness just saying, I don't know, he was sad. So like, it's great how Sadness is logical too. Like, she had read the manual, so she knows her way around. And then later, when they're trying to wake up Riley at the, like, it's just so clever too, the Dream Studio. And I love the line too when they first walk in and Sadness says, like, oh, this looks much smaller in person or something like that. And it's just so funny because if you've ever visited like a film set at all, seeing things on TV and then like seeing it in person, everything looks smaller in person. It's so true. Like any TV studio, anything like that. So another thing that just kind of felt so real. So then when Joy's saying like, oh, she's been through so much, let's excite her awake. And then Sadness is saying, that's never happened before. Like, Sadness just being super logical. And it is interesting too, though, that Joy, even though she is Joy, we see her at her breaking point. We see her upset and crying when she's down there in the memory dump and then looking at all of these long forgotten memories and saying, oh, remember when she used to stick her tongue out when she was coloring? And then she's saying, I just wanted Riley to be happy. And then when she sees that memory of, like, earlier when she's saying, oh, this memory of her teammates cheering on Riley, and then when Sadness remembers it, saying, oh yeah, that was when the prairie dogs lost, and then Riley was so upset. So then when Joy rewinds the memory, and then she sees, oh, because, like, Riley was upset, her parents consoled her, and then it led into the memory of Riley with her teammates cheering her on and everything. So then that's when it clicks for Joy, the purpose of Sadness, that she felt this joy afterwards because of Sadness. And then that whole montage of when they finally get back to headquarters. And it's just another great thing about Pixar movies, that the ingenuity of it all. Like when she's like, takes those imaginary boyfriends, like, I would die for Riley, and stacks them all up. And then she like flings herself the exact right moment to get Sadness. And poor Sadness on her little cloud, crying. Oh, and I also love the line just randomly when Sadness was like earlier when she's saying, oh yeah, remember that funny movie when the dog dies? Like, oh goodness, because that's her perspective, being sad. And I also love the concept too of the islands, how each of the islands makes up Riley's personality, and then one by one they're crumbling. Hockey Island, Family Island, Honesty Island, Friendship Island, Goofball Islands. That's so cute too. And then, like, so what's again amazing about Pixar, that we already had that super sad moment that made us all cry when Bing Bong disappears, and it's so touching but so emotional. And so then when they finally get back to headquarters, then the true emotional moment that just broke me down completely, like the whole thing throughout the movie when Joy's telling Sadness to not touch the memories because then like they'll be sad. And then when Joy walks up to Sadness and says, Riley needs you right now. And then Sadness is like amazed for a second. Because there's another sweet moment earlier too when Joy says to Sadness that was a great idea you had when they had woken Riley up. And then, that just reminds me too, the whole thing with like the dreams with fear. And when he's saying, this one again, let me guess, we have no pants on. And he's just so funny. This girl, like, she's one bad actress. He's so funny with his delivery, Bill Hader. I also love on a random note too when Riley's at school her first day and then it's like, as long as the teacher doesn't call on us, it's like, okay, how about you, Riley, tell us about yourself. And then he's like, right out of the gates, flipping out. But anyway, when Joy tells that to Sadness, and then Sadness is like, really? Like, she's happy that, like, Sadness having her moment when she smiles like that, she's happy. Joy is happy with her. So then when Joy tells her, Riley needs you right now, and then like after when Riley had run away and then she comes back, and then she starts crying in front of her parents, saying, I know you want me to be happy right now, but I'm sad. I miss Minnesota. And then they say, we miss it too. And then, like, that absolutely beautiful, poignant moment. It's just so unbelievable how it just feels so personal that when Joy holds out the core memories to Sadness, and then Sadness touches them, and then each of the core memories turn blue so that every time Riley thinks about them now she'll feel sad. That's just, it makes, oh my god, the reason, like, it's just so beautiful, makes me cry, because what's incredible first off is that with those memories, the memories themselves don't change, they stay the same. So like they're still happy memories, but it's a matter of now when she looks back on them she gets sad, she gets wistful, and it's like one of those things where if you look back on happy memories, and this has happened to me, that sometimes you get emotional because maybe the person sadly has passed away, or maybe you're no longer, like, say if it's an old friend, you're no longer close with that person maybe, or maybe if it's someone who's passed, like you're anyone, an old pet or grandparents or something like that. So then it's just one of the things where you look back like, it's a happy memory, but it's sad because you can't go back to that memory, but it's happy in itself because you experienced it. And as they say, it's better to have loved and lost than never have loved at all. So it's like, it's happy in and of itself, but it's just, it's gone now, and that's sad, but it's one of those like beautiful things because then afterwards when you reflect, you become happy. So then Joy understands that you have to go through sadness to, like, sometimes that's just how life is. You can't always be happy. There are struggles, there are hardships, and that with this sadness you come out stronger in the end. So then when she takes her hand and just puts it on top, and then there's that cathartic sigh that just again feels so real, like if you just were really crying a lot and you just have like that cathartic sigh, like, I feel better now because I cried and just made me feel better. So again, it's just such a beautiful, amazing thing that they do so incredibly well. We're crying for one reason because of the characters, and then we're crying on a whole other level, whole other reason because it touched us deeply and profoundly. And that's absolutely brilliant to me. It's just incredible. So that's what this movie did so well. That's what the best Pixar movies do so well. And at the end, when then they have a whole new console, and it's like, what's that button? Puberty. Yeah, probably nothing. So great. And then just all like the little antics at the end with everyone's emotions, like the kid freaking out, girl, like that flashing, and then like the dog and the cat. It's just great. It's just so cute. So a truly fun, beautiful, sweet, deeply emotional, fantastic movie. And this movie, of course, rightfully won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. I look forward to the next Pixar film, Soul. I'm sure that one's going to be amazing. And I still have, there's a few other ones that I still haven't watched that I've been meaning to watch. Eventually I will. But this one's still, like, top 5. It's incredible. And with all of that being said, I have an Inside Out story to share. I actually wrote this literally a day after seeing the movie. I was just so inspired and I just wanted to write something, so I wrote this. It's called An Emotional First Date. And I know actually that there was like a featurette on like the Blu-ray and DVD release, I guess, that was coincidentally Riley's first date. So that's unrelated to this though. But that's just a funny coincidence anyway. So anyway, with all that being said, without further ado, it's story time. At 15, Riley Anderson had blossomed from the goofy child she once was into an upbeat teenage girl whose love for hockey had only grown stronger over time. However, when she entered into the key developmental stage in life known as puberty, she discovered that she had a long road ahead of her in terms of dealing with not only physical changes, but emotional ones as well. She'd often get moody for seemingly no reason at all, and although it was frustrating at first, she came to learn that it was only normal. There were certain things surrounding puberty that were a bit embarrassing, and that was when she'd turn to her mother for advice specifically. She'd also learned that there were many wonderful things associated with growing up, which only became more apparent when Riley got asked out on her very first date. And of course, the moment she accepted, her emotions went wild. "Great, just great. What is she going to wear?" asked Disgust. "Maybe her black sweater with a tank top and a denim skirt? Ugh, no, not cute enough." "Oh my gosh, what if he tries to hold her hand or put his arm around her or kiss her?" asked Fear, hands in his mouth, rapidly chomping on his fingertips. "If that boy tries anything funny with Riley, he's going to get slapped real good," said Anger, smacking a fist into his palm. "This is only the beginning of years and years of heartbreak for Riley. I just know it," said Sadness. Joy stood at the center, uncharacteristically quiet, round blue eyes bouncing from one emotion to the next, as each of them went through their own outpouring of all the possible things that could go wrong on the date. "What if he takes her somewhere dangerous?" asked Fear. "Riley could get hurt." "Forget that," said Disgust. "What if they go out to dinner and Riley gets food stuck in her teeth? She can't risk having to face such a high level of embarrassment, especially not in front of a boy she likes." "That settles it," said Anger. "We've got no other choice. We need to call the whole thing off. I'll come up with a juicy, insulting text to send to the kid that'll make him regret ever asking Riley out in the first place." He marched to the control panel, wiggling his fingers over the buttons, a wicked grin stretching across his face. "No, let me handle this," said Disgust, pushing Anger aside. "The message should have a sarcastic, passive-aggressive tone, and sarcasm happens to be my specialty." "Well, maybe Riley could explain to him that she's changed her mind about going out with him because she doesn't want to do anything that will hurt their friendship," said Sadness, timidly sliding up between Disgust and Anger. "After all, nobody wants to lose a friend over a failed attempt at a relationship." "That actually makes sense. Relationships are scary. Riley's not ready. Maybe next year. Or, I don't know, in 20 years, said Fear as he looped himself over the other three emotions, stretching his long limbs to take control. Hey, back off. I said I'm in charge, said Anger, swatting Fear's hands away. Fear yelped and Anger cringed. For the last time, I can handle this, said Disgust, and she reached for the lever, just as Sadness delicately placed her hand on top of hers. I don't mean to pry, but I really think it should be me, said Sadness. Get away, all of you, said Anger. Make me, said Disgust. Stop yelling, said Fear. The four emotions wrestled one another, a tangle of blue and green and purple and red. Meanwhile, Joy silently observed the ruckus before her, a contemplative hand to her chin and the other on her hip. As her fellow emotions jabbed and fought with one another for control, she finally decided it was time for her to step in, and so she brought up her hands and clapped them together once, as loudly as she could. The four emotions simultaneously froze before collapsing to the ground in a pile of shapes and colors. Anger emerged first, vigorously rubbing his head and snuffing out the flame that had begun to flare. Fear popped up next, trembling fiercely and trying his best to compose himself. Disgust got up and shook her head as she smoothed out her dress and checked her nails for any chips. Sadness finally willed herself to get to her feet. Shoulders slumped as she sniffled and wiped her nose with the back of her hand. They all looked at Joy expectantly. That's more like it, said Joy, voice brimming with her usual positive, can-do attitude. Now listen up, everyone. I realize this is a tough and confusing time in Riley's life, but we all knew this day was coming ever since we activated the puberty button over 3 years ago. And yes, I'll admit that it hasn't been an easy road for Riley. There were body changes, mood swings, and let's not forget the time right around Riley's 13th birthday when she got her first... Stop, said Anger, holding up a thick red hand. Fear had already thrown his hands over his ears and clamped his eyes shut, while disgust wrinkled her nose in anticipation of what Joy was about to say. Anger waved his hand. No need to bring that up. We've already conquered that dark and unspeakable time during Riley's adolescent life, and we're still forced to experience it once a month, so there's no need to go into details, capiche? There was a breath of silence as Joy nodded in understanding, only for the silence to break as Sadness said, her period. Disgust, anger, and fear all groaned in unison. Fear was on the brink of passing out, while disgust seemed to be doing all in her power not to vomit. Anger dug his fingertips into his head, attempting to quell the fire that was threatening to erupt. "Sorry," said Sadness half-heartedly. Joy offered her friend a soft, reassuring smile. "It's okay, Sadness," she said. "Anyway, my point is, dating is a new part of Riley's life, but it's not something we can delay any longer. If Riley's ready, then it's only fair that we're there for her every step of the way. After all, we work better as a team, right?" The four emotions exchanged wary glances before they said in a reluctant chorus, "Right." "And," said Joy, "we all want what's best for Riley, right?" Another beat of hesitant silence until they finally muttered, "Right." "Which is exactly why we're not going to cancel the date and avoid a new and exciting milestone in Riley's life just because we don't know what to expect," said Joy. "Riley's going to go on the date with an open mind, and we'll make sure she has a great time. But I can't do it without you guys, so I'm counting on all of you. Riley's counting on all of you. What do you say?" More silence. Disgust flicked her hair. Fear bit his nails. Anger scratched his brow, and Sadness only frowned. They all exchanged more looks, their expressions gradually softening, and the grin on Joy's face grew larger as hope swelled amongst them. "I say," said Disgust, "we'd better help Riley pick out an outfit, like, now." While she had an eye for fashion and her own unique style, Riley Anderson was still much more of a tomboy than a girly girl. She had an aversion to flowery blouses, pink dresses, and uncomfortable heels. Instead, she opted for trendy clothes that were both chic and practical. Tonight, however, wasn't a typical night out with her friends, grabbing pizza with her hockey teammates or going ice skating with a group of classmates. She was going on a date with her crush, Danny Martin. They'd been friends for a year and had a lot of classes together. They'd exchange biology notes and sometimes flirt with each other at lunch. He'd compliment Riley's smile, and she'd blush and only smile wider. They'd hung out before, but only in group settings. This was their first date, a huge night for Riley, and she'd chosen her outfit accordingly. She wore a nice pair of dark blue jeans, a striped V-neck shirt, and black flats. She'd brushed her hair and put a small bow in it. Now she waited by the front door, while her parents sat in front of the TV, pretending like they weren't secretly watching their daughter as she anxiously chewed on her cuticles. "Okay, seriously, that's enough biting her nails. It's gross," said Disgust, pushing Fear out of the way and lowering the lever he'd been clutching. Riley made a face and dropped her hand. The doorbell rang, and Fear immediately cranked the lever back up. Riley's eyes widened as she let out a soft breath. He was here. "Oh no, what's happening? Forget it. She's not ready. Abort! Abort!" said Fear, scrambling at the knobs and buttons, prepared to have Riley run up the stairs and pretend like she wasn't home. When Joy stepped in, though, Fear immediately stopped, finding himself calmed by Joy's warmer-than-usual smile as she gently grasped his hands. He slinked away, allowing Joy to take control as Riley opened the door. "Hi, Danny," greeted Riley, her mood brightening. "Hey, Riley," replied Danny. He was a good-looking boy, shaggy blonde hair and crisp blue eyes. He, too, was dressed casually, donning a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. "You look really pretty." "Thanks, you too," said Riley, only for her cheeks to redden. "I mean, not pretty. Handsome, yeah." Danny chuckled good-naturedly, and Riley relaxed a little. "Come on, let's go," he said. Riley nodded, following him out. "Have fun, sweetheart," said Riley's mother. "Not too much fun," said Riley's dad. Riley quickly shut the door behind her, not wanting her parents to embarrass her. She and Danny walked together, the awkward tension chipping away little by little as they fell into pleasant chit-chat about the latest happenings at school. Joy observed the two with wondrous eyes, her cheeks raised in a grin. "I'd say it's going pretty well so far. They're getting along great. See, not so scary after all, huh?" She playfully nudged Fear, who jumped. Disgust, meanwhile, was far from impressed. "Where's he taking her anyway? It better not be somewhere boring like the movies." Yeah, especially if they're going to see one of those dumb little chick flicks. Man, I hate those, said Anger, arms folded tightly. Mini golf, said Sadness, pointing to the screen. They all looked up to see the sign, and ahead they could see the plush, fake green lawns of the miniature golf course, twisting like a maze and filled with large windmills and colorful obstacles. Ooh, how fun, said Joy as she leapt in the air and twirled, only to come back down to rest her elbows on Anger's head. He grit his teeth and growled, and Joy popped back up with a laugh. Whoops, sorry. He'll probably let her win, said Sadness in her usual dreary tone. Or he'll show off to try and impress her, said Disgust with a scoff. Whatever, it doesn't matter, said Anger. Either way, Riley's going to use her hockey skills to hit way more holes in one than this chump. Guys, remember, it's not about winning, said Joy. It's about having fun. Yeah, let's show him how it's done, said Anger, grabbing two levers and cranking them up full force. Riley's naturally competitive edge flared as she smacked the ball with her golf club and sent the tiny ball flying. It hit the windmill and shot in the opposite direction. Fear screamed and grabbed hold of the levers, jerking them forward. Riley ducked as the ball sailed past her head and hit a wall, landing on the ground and rolling down a long ramp until it fell into the golf hole. Wow, said Danny. Nice shot. Fear panted while Anger grinned smugly. Joy pressed a button and Riley giggled, cheeks flushing slightly. As the game progressed, the sun dipped in the sky, darkening into night. After the game ended, Danny treated Riley to ice cream, much to Joy's delight and even Disgust's rare approval. Danny and Riley were finishing up their cones as Danny walked Riley home. One hand clutched the cone while the other hung at her side, swinging in tandem with her footsteps. Danny boldly took Riley's hand, and Riley gasped. Fear was in control again, eyes bugging wildly, and hands braced to have Riley let go of his hand. Yet, as he glanced over at Joy, her expression kind as always, he relented. Riley smiled, and they walked hand in hand, the mood light and calm. It wasn't until they finished their cones and approached Riley's house that Fear was back on guard, ready to once again take the reins at any given moment. I had a great time with you, Riley, said Danny. You're a really good golfer. Thanks, said Riley. I had a really nice time, too. Cool, so would you maybe want to go out again sometime? Asked Danny. We could go bowling. Sure, said Riley in an eager tone, only to catch herself. Yes, sounds like a lot of fun. They smiled at each other, and when the light-hearted mood faded between them, a new feeling began to fill its place. It was an exhilarating energy, drawing them closer, inch by inch. And as it was happening, Riley's emotions came to life all at once. I knew it! He's going in for the kiss! Oh my God, he's actually going to do it! I can't watch! Said Fear, throwing a hand over his eyes and pulling at his purple skin, while his other hand pressed a button that sped up Riley's heart rate. That does it, said Anger, reaching for the controls. Time for Riley to give this kid a well-deserved smack upside the head. Good idea, said Disgust with a nod. Then Riley can turn her nose up at him with a huff and stomp away. And maybe she can have a good cry about all of this later, said Sadness. Fine, but first let me smack him, said Anger, grabbing a lever. Wait, said Joy, pointing to the screen. Look. They all snapped their heads up to look at the screen, only to find that it was going dark as Riley's eyes drifted shut. Fear's eyes, now peeking through his fingers, stretched wider than ever before, his other hand hovering over the fight-or-flight response, until Riley and Danny's lips met in a simple kiss. The emotions found themselves too in awe to speak. Fear and Joy exchanged a profound look, before Joy placed her hand on top of Fear's and pressed a button. Riley's heart fluttered as she drew back and opened her eyes, her cheeks warming as she grinned really wide. The five emotions stood motionless, Joy and Fear's hands still interlaced, when a familiar sound of glass marble rolling against metal railings caught everyone's attention. They looked to see a core memory of Riley's first kiss, yellow with a trace of purple, sliding into headquarters and traveling up the tube, bringing to life a new island. The emotions rushed up to the glass as the island sprouted, filled with hearts, flowers, chocolates, laced fingers, and a boy and girl kissing. Boyfriend Island, said Fear, hands pressed to the glass. Joy brought her own hands together, thoughts of what was to come filling her mind. How wonderful, she said, looking forward to it all. More dates, more kisses, more firsts, even the heartbreaks, as they'd all be there to help Riley through it together. All right, that was an emotional first date. So again, capturing just what the movie did then at the end, like when there was like a blend of emotions for each of the feelings then, and like each of the memories. And then, of course, a new island popping up. So, just a fun little thing that I had enjoyed writing. And hope you enjoyed it too. And with that, that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. And you could also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week is the 100th episode of Storytelling Saga. I can't believe it. And to celebrate, I'm going to be just doing a fun topic. I'm going to be talking about how to write a pilot. That's a TV comedy pilot in particular. So looking forward to that. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.